If you're taking on the role of being a director, you've signed up for a big task.
Making sure companies pay for performance is the biggest issue facing compensation committees.
Corporate Board Member presents the Board Governance Series with series contributors PricewaterhouseCoopers and Meridian Compensation Partners. On this edition of the Board Governance Series, shareholders are watching political spending. Is your board? With Catherine Bromilow, partner, PwC Center for Board Governance.
Hi, I'm Laura Finn, web editor of boardmember.com, and today I'm speaking with Catherine Bromilow, a partner in PwC Center for Board Governance. Catherine, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Laura.
You've come today to talk about corporate political spending, an issue that has gotten a lot of media attention because this is the first presidential election cycle since the Supreme Court's 2010 decision on Citizens United. Could we begin by having you briefly outline what's changed as a result of Citizens United and also what hasn't?
Sure, and let me start with what hasn't changed. What hasn't changed is companies can still contribute to trade associations or not-for-profit organizations that in turn use those funds for political purposes. Companies can also still do what's called issue advocacy, take out ads and run campaigns around issues. And third, companies can still have their political action committees or their own PACs. Now those PACs face pretty strict donation limits, and the donations can only come from, say, company employees and company executives, so from individuals. And there are also some pretty extensive disclosure requirements around company PACs. So that's what hasn't changed and what continues, but what really has changed is the rise of what they call the super PAC. And what the super PAC does is it doesn't have any limits on donations. Companies can donate company funds to super PACs with no disclosure requirements. And those funds can also be used to electioneer or directly advocate for or against a specific federal candidate.
And I think the key here is that companies, as I understand it, do not have to mandatorily disclose their corporate political spending. But some are choosing to do so, is that right?
That's correct. There are no requirements for a company to disclose, but it's amazing how things have shifted in just a few years. If we look back to 2005, there was only one company that provided any disclosure about corporate political spending. But as we look at it this year, and if you take the S&P 100 companies, approximately 60% of those companies do provide some disclosure of some elements, at least, of their political spending. What's notable, though, is how much that is related to the larger companies. If we look at companies smaller than the S&P 100, there are only roughly 24 companies that provide any of it. When we actually look at what they're disclosing, it's probably a few key areas. First, they're talking about what they give to trade associations that's used for political purposes. Second, they often disclose their policies or their guidelines around political spending. Third, they often make some disclosure around who in the company, from a title or position perspective, gets involved in approving the disclosures. And the disclosures also often include what role the board played in overseeing political spending.
How is this playing out with shareholders, Catherine? Are institutional investors focusing more on corporate political spending?
They definitely are, and it's actually been really interesting. By far, in the 2012 proxy season, this issue of political spending and disclosures on corporate political spending is the hot issue. Approximately 40% of all of the shareholder proposals this year focus on a request for more disclosure, more insight into political spending. And there are even a few that go beyond just asking for reports. There are some that ask for actually a shareholder advisory vote, a say on spending. There are a few that ask companies to cease all political activities, and there are even a few shareholder proposals out there that want to have more information about what companies are doing from a lobbying perspective. What's also probably interesting is that on this issue, the big proxy advisory firm ISS has come out and said it's changed its policy, and if there is a shareholder proposal for political spending disclosure, it will recommend a vote in favor of that. And similarly, some of the major institutional shareholders like CalPERS and CalSTRS have also come out and said that they would vote in favor of shareholder proposals that called for disclosure of corporate political spending.
So with the backing of these huge institutional investors and ISS and so many shareholder proposals on the topic, do you see boards starting to focus more on this issue as well?
We think boards are beginning to, and we see it sort of in two key ways. For some, what boards have asked management for is a report at the end of the year that sort of retroactively looks at what was spent. But we also see other boards take more of a proactive stance on this, and they will, much like they do with regular capital budgets, ask management at the start of the year, what are you planning to spend, sort of where are the limits, and what are you planning to spend it for, and really what are your objectives? At the end of the day, we do think that directors are beginning to understand and really recognize what an issue this is becoming for many institutional investors, and trying to understand, just even from a business perspective, what is it that management's trying to accomplish with its political spending, and what kind of controls they have around it, as well as potentially what some of the reputational risks might be to the company. And whether or not your company is choosing to voluntarily disclose on political spending, these are, I think, some good conversations to have in the boardroom. Probably the last thing I'll say is that there actually is a proposed law out there that would require corporate disclosure. It's a little too early to say right now as to whether or not that will go through, but I think that just sort of plays into the environment of how much focus there is on corporate activity in the political arena these days.
Definitely. This is a topic that I think will get hotter before it gets colder. So I thank you, as always, for bringing such pertinent information to our viewers.
Thank you, Laura.
And thank you for watching this edition of the Board Governance Series.
Catherine Bromilow can be reached at catherine.bromilow@us.pwc.com. The Board Governance Series is a presentation of Corporate Board Member, an NYSE Euronext company.